Yo, yo, yo. All right. All right, so let's see. Oh crap, I changed the... Let's see, I changed the layout to simple, and I want it not to be simple. Let's see if I can get that changed. Because I actually don't like that I just changed it. There we go. All right, perfect. Got it back. I just wanted it as in dark mode there for a second, but... All right, that'll work. What's going on, guys? Get everything pulled up here. All right. Okay, so we are going to do some threat modeling. I'm going to give everyone a little bit of a chance to come in the chat and make this kind of interactive. I'm going to explain kind of the purpose of it first. So, has anybody in the chat actually done threat modeling before? And if so, like, how much experience? Go ahead and give everyone a chance to come in. But we're just getting ready to start. We're going to basically do some threat modeling, talk about it, how it's applicable, why it's so important, and then how to do it with zero knowledge. So that's kind of our goal here, right? Is we're going to do it to a company that, as of right now, that company does not exist. We're going to invent the company. We're going to invent all the problems. And you're going to see how businesses actually consider risk, right? That's kind of the thought here. But this is going to be interactive in the sense of we'll need some comments and things like that, because I'm going to have the chat actually build the company with me. That way it's completely fresh, everything's new, and you're seeing exactly how I would do it for a real business. This is also something that businesses often pay third parties for. This is something that, as a consultant, that I do for companies. So this is a very good skill to have and helps businesses really understand where their risks and threats lie. All right, so first we're going to talk kind of what is threat modeling, right? So here they say, this is OWASP's definition. There's actually other definitions and stuff, but OWASP is very reputable, obviously. So you can see here they have an official threat model project page, and you can see they pretty much give you the nitty gritty of it, right? So first off, the term threat modeling has become quite popular. The State of Threat Modeling report points at a robust and improving practice across companies and enterprises of all sizes, embracing a growing number of tools and methodology. Basically, they're saying, hey, this is proven to continuously be helpful, is what they're saying. In 2020, a group of threat modeling practitioners, researchers, and authors got together to write this in order to share a distilled version of our collective threat model knowledge, blah, 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 blah. One of the outputs was this definition, right? And this is what's important, is understanding what threat modeling is, so that way you understand why you're doing it, because this is the type of work in like a SOC or in a business where this is the boring work that can really save you a ton of problems down the road. So this is the definition. Threat modeling is analyzing representations of a system to highlight concerns about security and privacy characteristics. So a lot of times when you start working in a SOC, or when you not even work in a SOC but work anywhere, right? Where there's security or risks, a lot of times you're coming in, the system's already in place, right? And if that's the case, the system's already in place, you don't know where the flaws in that system are because you didn't build it, right? And so you have to figure that out. And this is what, if you've ever had like a third-party risk assessor or anyone like that come in, this is kind of what they do. They kind of like look at, what threats are actually applicable to you and which threats are most pertinent, right? That's the biggest and most important aspect there. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for what threats are the most pertinent and most risky to our company, right? And I say to our company, we haven't even invented the company yet, so we're going to go through that first. But this is, like I said, it's going to be an interactive session, so if you're in the chat and you want to participate, please just throw like a 1 in there or something like that. If you want to participate in the actual threat modeling, like I said, throw like a 1, something in the chat. Just let me know that you are going to participate, because it requires a little bit of participation. The main reason is because we are creating everything from scratch. Yo, Maurice, what's up, brother? So Maurice wants to participate. Awesome. Really, all we're going to do is I'm going to be showing you guys how to do this because long story short, if you've never done threat modeling, most businesses and most SOCs and most security professionals, where they struggle a lot of times is they say like, I want to do threat modeling or something like that, right? But the reality is they say, I don't have the information. I don't have enough data. And I'm going to show you guys how, even with no data, we're making it all up. There is no data right now. We can do threat modeling. And so this is one of the most important skills you can learn. Super, super valuable. And we're going to go through it right now. So first things first, let's go ahead and talk about like the 3 rules we're going to have. So we're going to use this Excel spreadsheet and we're going to say rules for now. And I know it's small. I'll zoom in here. Maybe I'll zoom in. You can imagine what it'd be like if I zoomed in. Okay, so you can see we'll say rules. Rule number 1. And my 1 is messed up. That's why it's doing that. But rule number 1 is we do not have a complete asset inventory. Now, the reason we're doing this rule is because this is most immature companies, right? Is as far as immaturity from a SOC perspective or security perspective, they do not have a complete asset inventory. So the question you always get is like, what do I protect the most, or what is the most risk that I'm going to have when I don't even know what I have, right? And that's what we're going to kind of talk about. So then we do not have accurate network diagrams. Again, we're talking about our company is going to be kind of immature, and that's why we're doing this risk assessment. That's why we're, going through and threat modeling and doing all that. So we'll say we will document assumptions, right? So this is the reason I'm putting the assumptions thing is we're going to document things that we think will happen or could happen, or systems that we think exist, stuff like that. But they will be assumptions because we don't know. But an example of this would be, okay, we have XYZ platform, right? It could be whatever. Like, let's just say it was a ticketing system. Well, we know if it's a ticketing system, a good assumption is that it's going to have a database. So we know there's probably a database that's in there. Even if you don't have that listed in your asset inventory, we can assume there's a database, right? Now, you might come back and find out that no, they have it set up in a separate manner, whatever, doesn't really matter. But we're going to document assumptions because we want to give the most thorough threat modeling that we can do, even if some of our assumptions are incorrect. Okay. So the reason I'm doing this is because if you do threat modeling, I didn't mean to click whatever I just clicked, but if you do threat modeling and you look at this, most people, most classes you go to, most trainings that you go to, all that stuff, when they're doing threat modeling, it's almost always going to be a perfect scenario. And what I mean by that is they're going to be like, here's company XYZ, here's their 5 systems that matter, here's this, let's go ahead and do some threat modeling. That's easy to do, right? It's hard to do when you get to the real world and you're like, okay, tell me your most critical inventory, right? What's the most critical thing you have? And they go, we have no idea, right? That's the tough part. So we're going to go ahead and start. And we're going to maybe. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start. And one of the things that we have to start with, right, is we have to make our company. So here is our rules. Here we'll do company. So first, what we're going to need, what is the name of our company? It could be anything. Someone name a company for me. Make up a company name. Anyone in the chat, just shout out any company name. As long as it's, within reason, we'll use that company name. So what are we going to name our company? Right. And while we're doing this, right, we might as well, let me pull this up here. While we're doing this, let's go ahead and build ourselves a little. I'm going to show you guys how to do this because let's do this just like a real assessment. Let's pretend I'm a consultant and you hired me, right? And you hired me to do a risk assessment, and I'm threat modeling your company right now. So we're going to go ahead and do it exactly like that. So let's start with, again, what's the company name? Someone shout out a company name for me. Amazon? Well, don't use a real company name. We're making a company up. The main reason is we don't want to have any attribution with the company that actually exists, right? Let's do a completely made up company. We don't want a threat profile or anything with Amazon or threat model Amazon, because let's just say something were to happen to Amazon and I made a threat model and they saw the video or something, right? Like, you don't want to be involved in any of that. So what is completely made up company? Name anything. And like I said, guys, this is going to be a very interactive session. So if you guys want to participate, awesome. If you don't, that's cool too. I can go through it. Rookies. Okay. I like that, actually. I don't know why I like that, but I like it. Okay. So we're going to say rookies. We're going to say rookies threat modeling assessment debrief. And you can see all I'm doing here is going through and creating a slideshow presentation. I'm doing this as we go through because I want to create the presentation beforehand, so it's kind of like your final report, and then I can actually give the presentation later. So we'll actually take this, copy that. We'll just get rid of this. We'll say rules. Then we have our company here. And we'll say rookies. Okay. So our company's name is Rookies. That's what we're going to start with, right? Let's go to the next thing, right? So we've got this company, Rookies. What do they do? What is the company? Someone let me know. What do you think they do? It can be anything. It doesn't, there's no right answer. So we've got a company named Rookies. What do they do? What industry are they in, right? Are they in finance? Are they in retail? What do they do? What's this company do? And these are basic questions that we would, I don't know that I'd ask on an assessment, right? Like, what do you guys do? Because that would be kind of you should probably know that if you're already hired, but let's just think about, what do they do? This company can be anything. What do you guys think this company does? Company's name is Rookies. What exactly do they do? We'll go ahead and make them a little bit bigger. Sell comm. Like communications equipment? Is that what you mean, enchilada? Or does that say corn? Sorry, it looks like comm. Does that say corn? They sell corn, so they're in like agriculture? So they're selling corn, right? So they're in agriculture. Okay, if you're saying, like, if you're trying to be facetious about PORN, we're obviously just not going to do that. So, what else? What do you guys want them to do? Because this is, so if you guys don't know, by the way, I get it. Everybody, I like to joke around too. But we're trying to do this to kind of help people that actually need the help. So let's try to make it at least realistic, because that wouldn't be, don't get me wrong, there are companies like that that actually need threat modeling. That's true. But I want to actually make this realistic for people, because this is a real skill. I will tell you, even just having this skill, you can start going to companies and as a consultant doing this and making a lot of money doing this if you're good at it. I did not change that. There we go. All right, someone else. What does this company do? Rookies, because we're not going to do the one that Enchilada said, because I wasn't thinking about that, but what do you guys think? And like I said, this is going to be very interactive. This is going to be, I'm asking you guys questions. We're doing the modeling, and we're going to build this model together. If you guys don't want to participate, I totally understand. Lurkers are fine. Have no problem with that. But understand that it is going to be much slower if we lurk, because I'm going to have to explain every single piece, and I'm going to have to make up the pieces and everything else as well. So just want to make sure everyone's aware. All right, so what do I want you to do? I'm right now, we're just trying to, so we're making up this company. Maurice made the name Rookies, right? That's the name of the company. And right now we're trying to figure out a little information about them. I did start with the threat model. You might have missed it. That's okay. We'll go ahead and do the threat modeling, what it is, right? So here is threat modeling. So this is the actual definition that, right here is the actual definition. If I find it. Here we go. That's the manifesto, but the actual definition is threat modeling is analyzing representations of a system to highlight concerns about security and privacy. So long story short, what that means is the entire point of threat modeling is go to a company right now and tell them, what's your biggest threat, right? You could do a pen test and you might say, okay, the pen test, they were able to get in here and do this. Is that their biggest threat? Probably not. Probably not even close, actually. That's probably not their biggest threat. So the threat modeling is using information, doing an assessment, right? Finding the threats, and then figuring out what is risky, where do the threats actually have the risk, where can we minimize that risk, and trying to basically alleviate that. So this is OWASP threat modeling project. Like a gap analysis, sort of. I say sort of because it's much more refined than a gap analysis. You're not looking for gaps, you're looking for risks. So an example would be, right, there might be a ton of, or I'm sorry, you're looking for threats. There might be a ton of risks, right? An example is, hey, you have this critical vulnerability out there, and this critical vulnerability is a 10 out of 10. It's easy remote code execution, blah, blah, blah. But the threat might be very minimal. And so you might say you have a huge gap here, but the company looking at your assessment might go, yeah, but who cares? It's not a threat. It's not a big deal. Okay, so Maurice said Cell Tech, but Maurice came up with a name, so we're going to go with Teresh Sharma. I hope I said that right. Rookies is a finance app for first-time investors. Okay, so we'll get rid of the app piece because that makes it a tech company. which is fine. But we're trying to make this realistic to anybody. And if we stick to everything IT, it's going to kind of make it pretty easy. So we're going to say rookie's bio. If you guys don't know, I'm building this is going to be our debrief at the end. I'm building that out now. This is a good practice to do. Anytime you're doing something for a company, build out the final presentation as you're going. It'll save you so much time. So we're going to go ahead and say finance, let's see, finance app, financial investments. Okay, so we're just kind of building out a little profile, if you will, of them, right? And usually I wouldn't probably put a slide that for them that tells them, hey, here's what you guys do. Like, they probably know that, but we're going to add that in there just for our own sake so that we remember. And then we have this spreadsheet here. So company, rookies, we'll say industry. So what industries would they be in, right? What industries do you think rookies would be in based on this? And these 3 rules are what we're going off of just to save us some time. So what industries do you think? We obviously have finance as one, right? Because they're financial. So industries, we'll go ahead, say financial. What other industries, if any? Cloud, so tech. They wouldn't be in the industry though, right? If they're just selling financial investments, they wouldn't be in the tech industry just because they use technology. Someone in the tech industry would be like Cisco. Cisco is making tech products. I know Maurice said they're selling tech equipment. We stuck with the financial investment. So these are, by the way, these are all questions you would have to find out on an assessment, right? On an actual threat modeling assessment. Education. Okay, so if they're in education, right? If we're saying they're in education, that means they have to have an educational piece. So what that means is, if you just have an example is Rocket Money as an app or something, right? Is Rocket Money an educational, or are they in the education business? No, they aren't. Just because you're like giving tips doesn't make you education. So I'm not saying no. We're making this company out. This company, it doesn't exist. So if we want to say they're in the education industry, awesome. Are we saying that they do financial investments and they also do like some sort of education in that realm where they, maybe you can go to their school for financial literacy? If, like you said, is there going to be an education piece where you get college credits, right? Because that's kind of like the what you have to have to be in the industry. In the finance industry, you got to have actual something, education industry. You got to have something in education. So are we going to say that they do that as well? Data and analytics. Okay. So are they selling that data? What would they be doing to make it, why would they be in the data business or industry, right? Just having data doesn't make you in the data industry, right? You have to be like, your market is in that industry, right? That's kind of what, when we're saying what industry are you in, that's what we're talking about. What market are you in? What are you doing? Why does it matter? It's one of the most important questions you can ask, because what market you're in, what industry you're in, also means what regulations you're adhered to. It means what risks are involved, what APTs attack. It's one of the biggest things actually in the entire security realm that you need to know. They are in providing data and analytics to companies. Okay, so how do they do that? Right, that's going to be a really important question. When you say they're providing data and analytics, what are they doing? What are they selling? What are they giving? What are they doing? Right. Let's start there. And the main reason we're starting there is because, right, all we have to go off of right now is we have them, and they do financial investments. So they help companies. Is it companies? Is it B2B, business to business, or is it actually being sold to individuals, right? That's a big question. They are in targeting. No, you're kind of getting an enchilada, but you adhere to a framework like NIST. Even if you're not in cyber, your IT department would adhere to that. They are in targeting people to companies to help the companies grow. Can you kind of explain that a little bit? I'm a little bit lost on what you're meaning by that. I could be just not understanding that. And again, we don't have to, like, this could be as simple a company in the world as you work with them, they manage financial portfolios, and that's it. I mean, we don't have to make them have 5, 6, 7, 8 products or 5 industries or anything like that. That's the first thing we got to figure out, right? Is what do they do? What is the service they provide, right? Do they provide it for businesses or for individuals? Let's start there. Is it a B2B business? Okay, so you're saying they're selling data. They're selling their customers' data is what you're saying. So you're saying they're helping you they're doing financial investments, right? Because that's what the initial thing is. They're doing financial investments, but then they are selling your data on the side. Is that what kind of like the gist of it? And are we saying, someone shout out, are we saying they are doing financial investments for individuals or for businesses, right? This is going to be a long session, so if you guys want to, it doesn't really matter. Like I said, it can go on forever, but the more information we have, the better. If we're just saying they do financial investments for individuals, let's start there. I agree. Let's find a starting point, right? So we're just going to say for individuals. That means they are not taking portfolios for businesses, right? So that's really important to distinguish the difference, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and pull up so we've got financial investments. We'll go over here to industries. We've got financial industry, right? We could break it down a little further, right? We're not going to, just for the sake of time, like you said. But an example is if they do like investing, but their investments are specifically for businesses in retail, they would be involved in the retail as well. But basically, they're in finance, they're in fintech, because they're going to be doing some sort of, that type of investments. So really, the main thing is we're really looking for just kind of the finance sector, right? We're not really looking for anything crazy. Next question, just regulatory points, are they international, or are they simply a US based company? That's going to be really important because GDPR, European regulations, things like that. They are international. Okay. So I'm not going to ask. We're just going to pretend they are in Europe, right? So they're in US and Europe, like you said, international. But the reason I say that is because if they're just in Asia or something, right, then certain European restrictions don't apply. We're just going to say Europe, US for now, right? Just to make it easy. So we'll say industries, international, and we'll say US, EU. Okay. And we're just mapping out our company real fast. These are all things that, like, questions that you would need to be asking anyway. So most of the time, these companies would kind of give you that information, right? They would give you some of that, but that's all right. All right. So, excuse me. So we've got the international. We've got that they're basically in the finance industry. They're handling individual portfolios, so probably not, huge amounts. How many employees would we say they have? Right? How many employees? And then when did the company start? This is important, and I'll tell you why it's important. But how many employees? 515. All right, let's meet in the middle. Let's say 250. If everyone's good with that. So we'll say 250. That meets right in the middle. We had a 500 and we had a 15. And then what year did they start? Started in 2008. Okay, I like it. That's actually a perfect year. Okay, so let's build out. Again, would I give them their own bio when I'm presenting to them? No, but that's okay. We're going to do it now. So financial investments, financial industry, 500 employees, or actually we said 250, I'm sorry. 250 employees, and then started in 2008. Okay, so very quickly, this is an example of why it's important to ask these questions, right? And again, they would probably give you, like, you'd probably already know this information. You wouldn't have to, like, ask, hey, when did you start? Like, you could just research the company, but it's a made-up company, right? So this is an example of why it's so important to ask these questions. Is you said started in 2008. Does anybody know what version of Windows right now, Windows Server, is supported by Microsoft, meaning you're still getting patches for it? Does anybody know? Just out of curiosity. (2019). Yeah, you guys said 11. That's personal. That's endpoint. So we're talking about Windows Server. Yeah. So 2019 is the current version. Windows 2016, Windows Server 2016 actually is the latest you can, or the earliest you can have, because you can buy the extended pack right now and still get support. But Windows 2019 Server without extended support is the oldest server version you can have and still get patches. Okay. Again, there's caveats to that. So it's really important we know this, because if you notice, they started in 2008, right? So there's a very high likelihood that they have outdated servers. Very high likelihood. At least a couple, because anyone that's ever worked in a business knows there are always exceptions and certain systems that cannot be patched for whatever reason, and there's always those exceptions. So that leads us to our next one, right? So let's go ahead, and by the way, we'll change the formatting of all this, but for now, this is good. So we're going to go ahead and start our threat modeling just based off of the little information we have right now. So this is where it gets interesting, because you see people all the time whenever you're talking to consultants or like people in cybersecurity or whatever. You see them all the time talk about, if you know anyone that does threat modeling, they talk about how they don't have enough information. I see this all the time. As if you guys don't know, I'm an executive for a corporation, and if you guys don't know, like I see this all the time with leaders. What they do is they will say like, we don't have enough information, and that is why we're not doing XYZ. Or, I didn't know that risk was as big, right? A security team will come and say like, this is a huge risk. And they're like, I didn't know that. Well, they didn't know that because they're not threat modeling, right? No one at the company ever sat down and goes, where's our huge threats at, right? That happens all the time. And the reason it happens is a lot of times they'll start, right? They'll go, hey, let's see where our threats are. And they'll go, let's get a list of our assets. And then the very first thing out of their mouth will be, well, we don't have a list of assets. Well, we can't do threat modeling then because we don't even know what we have, right? And that is not true. You can always threat model with, the smallest amount of information, and that's what we're doing right now. Can we ask client for any pen test reports they have if they did it for any compliance, so we will have an idea about obsolete servers? So 2 things. There is no current, I say current, there are caveats to this because there's always an exception to the rule. There is no current compliance standard out there that's going to require internal pen testing. Almost all of them require external pen testing. So those pen test reports will not get you what you're asking for. It will actually give you that false sense of, oh, they don't have any outdated servers. But the reality is they're only going to be pen testing externally for compliance reasons. So while you could do that, you'll probably rely more on the fact that every company for compliance reasons has to do vulnerability assessments. And so vulnerability assessments will show those outdated servers because those are ran internally. So just want to clarify that, yes, you can ask, and if they have them, awesome. But those are pen tests or snapshots. Vulnerability assessments, like scanners, vuln scanners and stuff, those are currently running at all times, like monthly, weekly, whatever. So those would be a better resource than the pen test, but really good call out. So, okay, so now let's go ahead and talk about our assumptions, right? We'll go over here to this one and say, and by the way, I'm not putting this in any format specifically. I'm just going through it. So we've got our company. What assumptions can we make? Someone tell me an assumption that we can make based on the current data we have. Any assumption, right? And these are just assumptions, like I said. So we're going to say assumptions. What do you think? What assumptions do we have? They may be using an old password policy. So outdated server software, I like that. So we'll say outdated. Are we saying outdated server software? Or are we saying outdated OS, right? So that's a big difference because server software it depends on the wording gets finagled because server software could just be the OS, but we're talking about what is outdated here. Is it the OS itself or is there software on there that is outdated? They all have Windows 11 computers. Why can we assume they have Windows 11 computers? Okay, so we're saying outdated OS. So we're going to say assumptions, there's going to be outdated OSs. And then we're going to kind of put a reason why we can safely assume that. Company started in 2008. If you don't know, Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2 was out in 2008. So it's safe to assume they initially stood up on Windows Server 2008 R2. So company started in 2008. Safe to assume stood up in 2008 R2, and could have legacy OS. Okay, so that's the first one. So lacks password complexity. They may be using an old password policy. So you guys said poor password policy, lacks password policy, all that stuff. So when we're making an assumption, right, because this is based on we don't have data, at least not currently, like the company might not have the data. So this is based on that. If we're assuming that we don't have the data, why do we feel they would have password policy, outdated password policy, right? So our assumption is outdated OS. This is our assumption. Next, we're going to say why, right? So we just talked about it. This is the why. So why do we assume that? Okay, didn't want that. We can just say company started in 2008. That's a safe assumption. Okay. And then we're going to say, what's our confidence level of this, right? High, medium, low. I would say my confidence level of this is pretty high. It's pretty high because it's really common for outdated OSs, especially for an older company. And then what would we need to confirm it? So this is the questions you're basically going to be going and asking, right? You're going to go back to the company. You're going to be doing interviews, things like that. And you're going to say, how can I confirm this? So the managers and CEO would have poor password naming. Well, okay. So once again, so these are the 4 questions we're going to ask about the assumptions, right? Or 3, I guess. What assumptions, why, our confidence level, and what would confirm it? So if we're saying the managers and CEO would have poor passwords, why would we say that? And then you're saying confirming it would be Nmap. So keep in mind, this is an assessment and threat modeling. This is not an engagement. What that means is you don't have authorization to run anything on their machine, right? That is not how most engagements or assessments, run. Could you theoretically do this? Yes, you theoretically could, but think about an assessment. If you guys have ever gone through an assessment, you would never be like, hey, we're going to assess your guys' security and then give you feedback, and then be like halfway through it, go, I'm going to run Nmap on your machine. That's just not feasible. It's not realistic. It's outside the scope. There's a couple things you could do to confirm it. 1, ask for their vulnerability scanning results. So scanning results would confirm it. What else? Interview. You could interview their IT folks and they could confirm it. That's very common. If you've ever done any type of assessment, there is almost always an interview. They will go through and they'll get key stakeholders from each business, right? Or each piece of the business. And they'll say, hey, I've got 50 questions. Let's just go through them. Boom, 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 boom. And then they use that and they build their assessment. So why? Because if they do not look after their OS, they won't bother upgrading the password policy. Okay, but we don't know that. I think you guys are misunderstanding. So let's go back, because there's a big misunderstanding here, right? Huge misunderstanding here. Okay, so when we're talking outdated OS, we are not talking about their personal machines. We're talking about their servers. That's first. Okay. Most Windows OS or Windows machines can get updated patching, right? Windows 10, Windows 11, whatever. So we're not talking about their personal machines, because that I can almost guarantee you is upgraded at least to where they're getting patches. So we're talking about their servers. That's number 1. The second thing is, we are not talking about, when you're saying that they have outdated OSs, we are not saying all of your servers are outdated. That is not realistic. That company would be tanked in about 10 minutes if that was the truth. What we're talking about is an exception to the rule. A lot of times with legacy apps, what happens is those legacy apps. Let's say you started in 2008. You probably built your app initially in 2008, right? Whatever you built, whatever, or you bought a tool in 2008, right? And then you cannot upgrade to the next version because it breaks the app. That happens all the time. So then you keep it there and you go, okay, well, we're still getting patches like for 10 years. You go, okay. And you keep that system. And then those patches fall off. They go, Windows says, we're not giving you patches anymore. And you go, well, our business runs on this app. We can't get rid of it anymore. And now you have an exception. That's an exception. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about all their outdated OSs. If they had all outdated servers or all outdated Windows clients, they would not be in business because they would fail every audit and be fined rigorously. So what we're talking about is an exception to the rule. We're trying to model their biggest threats, right? Their biggest threat, if it was as easy as, oh, all of your systems need updated, that wouldn't even be, you wouldn't have to pay anybody to tell you that. You're talking about, what about older computers like hardware? Depends on what's on them, right? So an example would be older hardware isn't a risk unless it's at risk of breaking, whatever, and then you have to upgrade it, which, in your point, right, that is a risk. So we should add that in there. It's a good exception that outdated hardware, right? They might not be life cycling their hardware. So we can say company started in 2008, confidence level, I would say medium. The reason I say medium is hardware is not the same as operating systems. A lot of companies run on VMware. Very different. When I say very different, what I mean is they can upgrade the hardware without changing the OSs. Very different. Doesn't affect a lot of things. So our confidence level is a little lower on that. Doesn't mean they might not be outdated, right? That could still be a huge risk. What would confirm this? So what do you guys think would confirm the outdated hardware? I would say an inventory list, if they have one, and interviews. And then you could obviously just ask to see the hypervisor. So ESXi logs. ESXi logs would easily do this. All right, so we know now that two risks they have. Assumption, authentication may have evolved over time. Old accounts may still exist without strong protections. Okay, so that's a good point. There might not be MFA, right? So let's think about this for a second. So right now we're saying we haven't got to this question yet. Are they, and this is a question, we made up the company, so we can decide this, right? Is the company hosting their bread and butter, right, on-prem, or are they hosting it in the cloud, right? Or is it hybrid? What do you guys think? This is up to you guys. We're going to put that in here, right? Outdated OS, outdated hardware, hybrid. Okay. I'm glad you said hybrid because that would be really the only thing that makes sense here. Is it possible in 2008 that they stood up all their stuff in the cloud? It's possible. Very unlikely. So we will say hybrid cloud on-prem. Okay. So very, very good point. Is probably a hybrid environment. So authentication may have evolved over time. Old accounts may still exist without strong protections. So a couple of things. What do you guys think? This is our threat modeling as a community here. We're doing our threat model. Do you think there is a high likelihood, and I say high, it could be a low confidence level as well, a likelihood that they turned MFA on for some people but did not turn it on for others? What do you guys think? Yes? Okay. What's everyone else think? What's everyone think? Do you think that they would turn on MFA for some people, not for others? I'm curious what everyone's thoughts are. I would say it's probably not likely. It may be a group policy, but it's also, even in like O365, when you turn it on, right, it's handled by your organization, so it's organizational wide. That's not how it works though, Crunchy. You could theoretically do that, but it would actually be really abnormal to do that. Like, you wouldn't be like, hey, all new employees are required to MFA, but all old employees, you guys are good, keep doing your thing. That would almost never happen. It is a org change. It would be an entire org change. So they would either have it or they wouldn't. It's not really that normal to do like a hybrid. Like, some people have it, some people don't. It's possible, but not really normal to do that. All right, let's see. What other assumptions do you guys think? And we don't have to do all, like, for sake of time, right? We can do as many as you guys think. I'm thinking from startup until now. Okay, I like that thought, right? Older employees might have BYOD, and that is very realistic, because when they started, they probably didn't purchase equipment for everybody. They then would probably offer it to people. And most people, if you can do it without it, which you can in a lot of hybrid environments, I would say they probably kept their own device. That's a safe assumption. It's okay. You guys are getting lost in the MFA thing. I don't think you guys understand. MFA is actually a requirement by a lot of regulatory bodies at this point. It's not something that's optional, right? Like, Navdeep, when you're saying not everyone wants MFA, 99% of organizations, you're not going to be like, I don't want MFA, no thank you. They're going to say, okay, then find a new job, because they legally have to require it, right? There's almost every regulatory body at this point is pretty much saying, if you don't have MFA, you're going to get fined, right? So it's not like a thing. The difference is, right, BYOD, usually a company is likely to say, hey, do you want us to buy you a device, if they started up and now they're purchasing equipment, but they're not going to force it, because it's actually saving them money to have you use your own device, and it's available through Microsoft as far as like Intune and stuff. Yeah, there's no company that's going to be like, hey, you guys can use MFA if you want to, but you don't have to. So I don't see that as an actual risk here. Possible, but probably not a real risk. So assumption, BYOD devices in play. I think company started small and grew. So started small. I think it's safe to say, I'd say we'll put that as a medium. It's probably safe that it probably did. How would we do this? Interview. I would say an interview would be the best way, because they're not going to have, or we could say Intune logs or Intune dashboards, because Intune access, because Intune can actually show us what registered devices each person has. What about managing the device? Oh, sorry, I missed one. MFA is a company-wide thing. Segmented of the networks. I'm not sure. Is that the assumption you're saying, Crunchy? Is that they don't segment their networks? What about managing the device? If it's BYOD, it's most likely Intune. We're going to say, we've been saying they're Windows. We're going to say they're a Windows shop. What if I just grind out my portfolio instead of getting certs? What do you think? I think it depends a lot. There's way more variables than just, I have a portfolio, because your portfolio could just suck compared to what jobs you're applying for, right? Like an example would be like, hey, your portfolio shows that you're extremely, actually, I'll give you a perfect example, guys. I had someone interview for a job, 6 months ago, something like that. About halfway through the interview, right before the interview, I looked at their portfolio and I was like, wow, this person is extremely skilled at coding. The job I was hiring for was not a coder, was not a programmer or a dev or anything, right? It was a cybersecurity analyst. I was like, would that help my team? 100% it would help my team to have this good of a developer or a programmer involved. I then talked to them. Interviewing them, I was going through their projects. And I was like, oh, you've done this. They didn't have certs. They didn't have whatever. I said, that's really impressive what you've done. Not only do I think you would be miserable on my team because you aren't interested in cybersecurity, you're interested in development. I said, you'll be miserable on my team. And I think your skills will be wasted because a cybersecurity team doesn't need a full dev. They need programmers, or they need to have programming experience, but not a full development, front and back UI, all that stuff. Like, they don't need all that. So I said, I'm not going to hire you for this position, but I am going to go over here and get you a job as one of our developers, because I think that's where your true passion lies and that's where your skill set lies. So your portfolio, in his case, actually hurt him more than it helped him if he really wanted that job, which he did not. He wanted to be a developer. Crunchy, what other question do you have? Yep. Assumption, excessive retention of sensitive user and financial data. Okay. I like the assumption, but what's the why? Right? What's the why? Why do we think that? Why do we think that? Another question is segmenting networks for the threat modeling. I'm not sure I understand. Are you asking, will I ever collab with David Bomboclat? I've never spoke with him, so I doubt it. You and your networks, bruh. Oh, you're saying with him. Yeah, I'm not sure what you're saying with the network thing. Like, are you saying that's an assumption? Is that they aren't segmenting their networks? I'm not sure what the question is. And keep in mind, you could literally put in here all these things you guys are saying and just put low confidence if you don't know. The problem is, or not problem, but someone has to go back and ask these questions or validate it because you need to confirm it, right? So we're going to take all these assumptions and then we would go to the company and say, hey, we have all these assumptions about what we think is your biggest risk and your biggest threat, and we need to validate some of this stuff with you. So you could do that, but then you're actually adding work to yourself if you have very low confidence in it. So you want to try and keep the confidence in like what you're, what you actually think might be at risk, right? I can tell you some of the assumptions I would have, right? Like an assumption I would have is probably no dedicated IR team. The reason I would say that is a company of 250 people probably doesn't have a dedicated IR team. They probably have one, maybe two IT people that are doing security as well. And company is relatively small. I would say that's high. We could interview, org chart, right? Those would validate. And the reason I say interviews, they may have it on a retainer. They may have an IR team on a retainer, and that's fine. They may not. If they don't have a retainer, cool. That would be my recommendation for the threat modeling, right? Does have the company segmented network since the company is using BYOD? Segmented networks and BYOD aren't exclusive. There's no correlation there. You can use BYOD and still have completely segmented networks. You can use things like machine level certs and just have them connect. Okay, so let's go in here. We've got our assumptions, outdated hardware. We'll say leftover BYOD remnants, if I spell remnants right, and then no dedicated IR team. What other assumptions do you guys have? So far, you guys are doing exactly what you should be doing, asking those questions, right? This is how easy it can be. It sounds hard, but when you start thinking about it, right, this isn't that hard. Go look at companies from 2008. How many of you, well, I'm not going to ask this because you guys don't need to tell me your age or anything, but I can tell you in 2008, security was not an issue as far as like companies didn't care about security. So it's safe to say that things from 2008 probably aren't that important, right? I could tell you another one. What do you guys think? What about lonely people with nobody to talk to? That is vulnerable to social engineering. Okay, that's not a risk here. The reason is there's a couple of reasons actually. One, not just legally, but from an HR standpoint, you can't go ask people about their mental health at a company. You just can't. That's got nothing to do with it. Pen testing or cloud security for future jobs. I'm not. Okay, this isn't frustration or anything. This is just, I'm just explaining something to you guys. This is something with younger generations, and I'm older than I look. This is something younger generations do. You guys come in here a lot and just say like things like that, like pen testing or cloud security for future jobs. That's not even a complete sentence, right? And I'm not like saying that in like you need to have a perfect sentence, but ask a legitimate question, right? Don't say pen testing or cloud security future jobs. Like that's not even a question. Like I can't even answer the question. And also, even if I answered the question, it would be inaccurate because I don't even know what your what your background is, what your industry is, what anything is. I can't give you good tips based on a 5-word sentence, right? So incomplete sentence. So, okay, phishing links. So you're saying phishing links is one of the threats. Malware on BYOD devices. I'm not really worried about malware on BYOD devices. If they have Intune access, I would look at just simply review their Intune policies. Their Intune policies probably state that you have to have some sort of antivirus on your machine in order to actually access things. So I'm not as worried about that. You're from the Netherlands. Okay, awesome. You don't have to tell me. I mean, I'm not asking you guys' stuff. Phishing links. So phishing links, I think one thing we would look at is I think it would be safe to say that their phishing training probably needs some work. Phishing training / click rate is probably high. Company is relatively small, which means low budget. We'll say that's a medium because there are some really good phishing training simulations and platforms for low budget companies. It's just a matter of if they found the right one. And we'll say interview for that and tool assessment. We'll assess what their tool is. So that's a good call out. Add that. Okay, social media information. Okay, getting social engineer with zero pressure about company names or people names. Okay, so I think you guys are missing some of the threat modeling part of it, and that is or some of the assumptions part of it. This is not when you're threat modeling, you're trying to look at the business technology. I don't really care about social engineering here, right? The phishing training one works because it is part of the technology, but I don't care that you have a LinkedIn over here or whatever. I'm not doing a social engineering investigation or anything like that. I'm simply looking at your tech stack, your policies, your procedures, the way your business is ran, and saying, here is your problems. Here's the number one problem, the number two problem, the whatever. I'm modeling those threats for you. I can't control that you hired 6 mentally ill people over here. I can't control that you have a bunch of lonely people over here, right? That's an actual much bigger issue. I can't control. So rootkits, bot kits, all that stuff, that's not what we're talking about here, right? You guys you're digging way too deep into the woods, or in the weeds, excuse me, not the woods. Way too deep in the weeds. This isn't a try to fix or solution things. It's find the gaps, right? We talked about gap analysis earlier. We want to talk about that. Another big assumption here, right, would be, hey, we talked about it. They're in US and Europe. Where does the data sit? Network firewall, you guys are, again, just saying words. You guys aren't actually saying, like, complete thoughts. So I can't, I don't know if you're saying, like, the network firewall would be outdated. I don't really know what you're saying there. So I can't help with that one. But we know they're in Europe and US, right? So based on the fact that they're in Europe and the US, it's safe to assume that data residency is a problem, right? I would say data residency mixed, right? Company resides in 2 continents. I would say that's pretty high. I would say it's probably almost certain that people's data from the US sits in Europe in some places. Exactly. They are complying. If you work in the EU and the US, you have to comply with those standards. So yes, they are. Network diagram, data retention policy. So again, we're talking about, okay, what's the assumption? The assumption here is that the data residency is mixed, right? Why do I believe that? I believe that because the company resides in 2 different continents. It's a relatively small company. They're residing in 2 different continents. They probably are not segmenting all their customers. They probably have one customer platform, and they're probably managing them together, right? What's my confidence level of that? Pretty high, because they are a small company. They probably can't afford 2 different tenants for the same application, that stuff. You would say they are poor standards. Okay. I don't know if that has something to do with the threat modeling, or you're just saying that you think the US and the EU have poor cyber standards. And then the network diagram. Now, if you remember, we do not have network diagrams, right? Which is fine, but that still would prove it if they do have a network diagram for this. And their data retention policy, whatever their policy is for data retention, where is it stored, how long is it stored, all that stuff, that will prove to me what they are. You say the company has poor standards. Okay. Keep in mind, you guys made this company up, so that the company has whatever standards we've set. These are assumptions. If you guys don't know what assumptions means, it means I'm assuming something. I don't know anything. I don't know any of this. So to say they have poor standards, there has to be a why, right? Like, what's the reason? Okay, so you guys are getting really, really deep in the woods. We're not talking about every single use case here. We're talking about high-level stuff, right? Like, for instance, I'm not saying, hey, sometimes the data from the EU gets mixed with the US and stuff. I'm saying all of your data is probably mixed. That's it. Just all of your data, not like specific use cases. I do think Team Mason Plaza, you're not dumb at all. Actually, I was actually going to say using ChatGPT and using company private information is actually one of the big risks that I think needs to be on here. Huge risk, probably the biggest risk that we're not talking about here. the sending passwords via email at work without encryption, that's a really specific use case that I don't have any reason to believe they would be doing that, especially since we're talking about their Microsoft shop. O365 has the auto encryption already in there, so there's no reason why that would happen. But I do think AI shadow AI risk, that is a huge risk. Company is lower budget, so they probably don't have a dedicated AI agent or AI platform. This would be an interview because we would ask, hey, what AI platform do you guys use? And then we would ask for DNS logs if they have them. If they have them, we can see how many people are using AI, shadow AI. Because they don't have a team to keep up to date on. I'm not really sure what that means. What do you mean they don't have a team? But that's okay. All right. So how many assumptions do you guys want to do? We can do these. I mean, we can do as many assumptions as you guys want, but keep in mind, we aren't actually modeling anything yet, right? These are we're just talking about them. We can do this all day long with all the assumptions, and you would do this all day long with all the assumptions. You would break this down severely. So what do we think? How many of these do you guys want to do? How many assumptions? And I'm saying before we move on to the next step, by the way, not before we're done. Old hard drives not properly destroyed. Again, you guys are talking like extremely specific use cases. You guys are not talking, what you're talking about, Tara Sharma, is just data retention. We already talked about data residency. So if data residency is sitting on hard drives somewhere, that's also another issue. So we could just change it to data retention policy. Ports like FTP that are, okay, you guys are just, I can't tell if you guys actually don't understand. Please actually tell me, because I want to make sure you guys do understand. I want to help. If you guys actually don't understand, or if you guys are just saying that, like just saying specific use cases just to be silly. I hope you also have something smart to say. All right, Enchilada and Mason, you guys, Mason, you actually had a good answer, so I don't know why you said you're dumb, but whatever. Ports like FTP that are unencrypted. Again, not at all what we're talking about. We're not talking about a security assessment. We're talking about threat profiling, right? Threat modeling. We are saying, what threats does the company have, not what vulnerabilities. You guys are talking about vulnerabilities. A vulnerability would be port 21 is unencrypted and open. That's a vulnerability. We're talking about a threat, right? The threat is port 21 is open and we're hosting sensitive data on it, right? So, because FTP alone being open and not encrypted is not a threat. There's no threat there. The threat lies in what's behind it and what's the risk of it happening. Okay, you say they don't have a team to keep up to date on GDPR and the US. I would say they probably do, or else they wouldn't have a business anymore. It is obvious if you hack into the mainframe. I agree. I'm in the deep end trying to swim. You guys don't have to guess here, right? Like, the whole point of this is showing that you can do it with as much knowledge or as little knowledge as possible, right? Most companies you go to is from 2008, they probably would have at least an asset inventory. And I say at least an asset inventory because it may not be perfect, but it will be an asset inventory, right? And they probably won't have perfect network diagrams, but they might have something, right? So it wouldn't be a complete guess every time. So, okay, we've documented enough assumptions. I think we're okay with assumptions. Does everyone feel comfortable, at least with, I mean, don't get me wrong, when you're normally doing this, you would be listing tons of assumptions because you could just be thinking, going, like running through your head and thinking of all these. But is everyone comfortable for now that they understand the concept of it? I want to make sure you guys at least understand the concept, feel comfortable that if you were given this, hey, threat model this, you could at least figure out what assumptions based on what you have in front of you. Does everyone feel comfortable with that? Okay, we can move forward. Okay, perfect. So now let's go ahead and say crown jewels, right? So based on does the company have current Wi-Fi standards? Who gives a crap? Let's start there. Wi-Fi doesn't matter. This company's still alive from 2008. That means they at least are smart enough to know you're probably not going to do any of your work on Wi-Fi, right? Keep in mind, if you guys don't know, I'm just going to kind of lay it out. Most companies don't just operate on this, like, because this is the problem with like Try Hack Me, Hack the Box, all those different platforms. They teach this like, like if you hack into the Wi-Fi at the company, you're in. 90% of the time, you could go to a company, they could give you the Wi-Fi password, you still couldn't get on their network because there are other things in place, like network security, like machine level certs, like all that stuff. If they have public Wi-Fi, who cares, right? Most companies, you go there, they have a public Wi-Fi, they have guest Wi-Fi. Guess what? You're not going to get on their guest Wi-Fi? Any of their company data, right? So who cares? Like, I own a consulting company and I'm an executive and I do work for all kinds of companies. I'm in the military and do work for other companies. And almost every single company, when they say we have this extra guest Wi-Fi over here and it cool. Who cares? Don't even waste your time looking at who logs in. Who cares if a hacker is on it? Who cares, right? It's guest Wi-Fi. It should be guest Wi-Fi, right? Yeah, sure, you cracked it. Who cares? It's guest Wi-Fi. Treat it as a public Wi-Fi, right? I don't care what you do with it, right? But is it possible to pivot to the company? No, it is not possible. Not if it's set up correctly, which it's not hard to set up. It is almost excruciatingly easy to set up. Most companies are not going to connect it to their corporate network. That would be just dumb. It wouldn't even make sense. It wouldn't even be logical. Most companies are going to have, they're going to have security around their network. You're not going to be able to just come sit down and log into their Wi-Fi and you're in. Like, that's just, if it was that easy, hackers would just do that to every company. It wouldn't be hard, right? Because what is their guest Wi-Fi password? Do you really have to crack it? It's probably something to do with their company, the year maybe, Like, the point of it is to make it accessible to guests. So if they don't have it segmented, you don't need to like try and crack the password. They'll probably give it to you because it's their guest Wi-Fi, right? Question: if I crack the main Wi-Fi, I will have an internal IP that I can scan the whole network. That is incorrect. 90%. I say 9%. Okay. Let's just pull this up to see. Okay. How many of you are familiar with NAC, Network Access Control? So let's say I have, this is specifically Cisco. I don't want to actually do Cisco specifically, but a NAC system can deny network access to non-compliant devices. What does that mean? It means you go ahead and connect to my network. You cracked it, you got in, whatever, you hop in. Guess what? You do not get access to anything because you didn't pass the checks that I put in. What are those checks? It's probably that you have our EDR installed, that you have our machine cert installed, which you can't get. It's probably that you have the XYZ installed, and et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of checks that go into place. You cannot just connect to their network, right? They will have an NDR, possibly. Even if they do, it doesn't matter. The network access control prevents exactly what you guys are talking about, and there's a reason it exists. That's crazy. It's been around for a long time. This is why I tell people, stop taking Try Hack Me, Hack the Box, CTFs, all that stuff as real skill, because it's pieces of skill, but you have to have experience to understand how it all plays a part. And it's really important that you guys like understand that, because it is of value to work in a help desk, to work in a like those. There's a reason they're still like the number one way into cyber, because they are valuable. Okay, so excuse me. So now we're talking about our crown jewels, right? So this is your bread and butter. What are the biggest, most important things that, you know, you're going to need to worry about? All right. What do you guys think? What would be some of the crown jewels? So we're going to, just for time's sake, we're going to choose like 3 to 5 data types, right? What do you think? What would be some of the data types that might be our crown jewels? Why do companies do Wi-Fi testing? Because there's still risk involved. The risk isn't so much to the company. The risk is to the Wi-Fi endpoint, right? If you can DAuth all of my attackers or all of my clients, you just DDoS my company. If you can DAuth capture the handshake, then you can set up an evil twin, and then now you're actually messing with my employees. There's all kinds of reasons to do Wi-Fi pen testing, or sorry, Wi-Fi testing. It's not really to do with I'm worried that they're going to get on my network as much. It still exists that like there still is a risk, right? If I get your machine cert, or if I get a machine, then I can still do it, but that's not really the thing. That's the risk. Oh wow, I realized the information I be lacking when I do Hack the Box encoding. Jesus, dude, this opened my eyes. Oh, I'm glad that it helped. Old employees not remove. Okay, we're past that. We're past the assumptions. We're done with the assumptions for now. We can come back to it at the end if you guys are curious. But for the sake of time, we're going to pick 3 to 5. Let's stick to 3 to 5. 3 to 5 data types that are our crown jewels, right? What are the things that we need to protect the most? Customer data. Okay, so what customer data, right? You're right, customer data, 100%. What customer data are we going to stick with? You are right, customer data is one of the main ones, but what customer data? PII, PHI. Well, we wouldn't have their public health information, right? Or sorry, public personal health information. Passwords and email are Mona. Credit card information. Okay, so let's start with, right, identifiable information. So let's start with that, right? So our customer identity information. Customer identity information, okay? And then you said the PCI, right? Payment card industry, so we'll say PCI data. Okay. What else do you guys think? We're just going to pick 3 to 5. So just do like 3, 5, whatever, and whatever else. So we've got our customers' data, like their PII. We've got credit card data. What else? And we'll go ahead and say here, crown jewels, customer PII, PCI data, social media, not relevant. I'm not worried from a business perspective about your social media. Source code, okay. So we have like proprietary apps maybe involved, and source code is one of the things we're worried about here. I like it. So we'll say source code. Okay. What else? We'll do one more. I added it to the slideshow as well. authentication data. Okay. Anyone else want to take a shot at one? All right, we'll just stop there and say RFID ID. Crunch, at this point, I think you're just trolling, to be honest with you. So we'll just say authentication data, right? Okay, so here's our crown jewels, right? And when I say our crown jewels, most people think of like assets, right? But we don't have a very good asset list. It says here, we do not have a complete asset. So we're going off of data that we know they transmit, right? We could also add in here, we're not going to do it for sake of time, but we could add in here bank routing information, all of that stuff, like what funds data is going to as far as, or what funds money is going to, right? Because, you know, we're doing a financial investment portfolio. So maybe they're doing S&P 500 and they have like how many people are invested in the S&P 500, stuff like that. Those analytics, right? Those are things that could be an issue. He said, and he called me dumb with an answer like that. I think Enchilada called you dumb. But I don't remember. Okay, so by the way, you guys can ask other questions, like not to do with threat modeling as well. I'm just explaining that there's a reason companies pay a lot of money for consultants and stuff to come in and do this threat modeling. It's because it is of extreme value once you see like all it done. Yeah, Enchilada called you dumb. All right, so okay, so now we're past the we're past this. So what we need to find out, right, for each data type, we'll just say these are the questions we need to ask, right? So where was it created? So where, or origination point. So where does the data originate from, right? Where does it like, and I'll explain it here in a second. So where's it stored? And, you know, we're going to ask a bunch of stuff here, but where does it move to? And then like, we're purposely not going to ask every question because again, we'd be here all night. But then we'll just say like, who has access to it, right? So keep in mind, this is not every question. We're not going to ask every single question intentionally, right? We don't have time to do all that. So let's go ahead and start with customer identifiable information. All right, guys, I will be right back, actually.